Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. In this video, we'll be covering the 10 news stories that you need to know about from yesterday. So sit back, relax, and get ready to stay informed with our roundup of yesterday's news. Let's dive in. 1. Xi, Putin meet in show of unity, The Guardian, USA Today. On Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin received Chinese leader Xi Jinping for talks, demonstrating their solidarity as Putin faces allegations of war crimes for his invasion of Ukraine. The meeting, which lasted over 4 hours, took place amidst mounting opposition from the United States and its Western allies against Russia over Ukraine. Xi expressed China's willingness to work with Russia to defend the world order that is based on international law. However, Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized Xi's visit, as it coincided with the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for Putin, implying that China does not feel obligated to hold the Kremlin accountable for its actions in Ukraine. 2. Report. Immediate action needed to prevent climate catastrophe, The Washington Post. A new report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns that the world is on track to reach a tipping point within the next decade, making catastrophic warming inevitable unless immediate action is taken to transition away from fossil fuels. The study suggests that the goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial temperatures is likely to be missed by the early 2030s. Once this threshold is crossed, scientists predict that the consequences of climate change could become too severe for humans to adapt, leading to devastating events such as heat waves, famines, and other disasters that could result in the deaths of millions over the rest of the century. 3. Biden issues first veto to block anti-ESG bill. NPR, Bloomberg. For the first time in his presidency, Joe Biden exercised his veto power on Monday, blocking a bill that sought to overturn a rule permitting pension managers to take into account environmental, social, and corporate governance (ESG) considerations when making investment decisions. In his veto message, Biden argued that retirement plan fiduciaries should be allowed to consider any factor that would maximize financial returns for retirees across the country, which he deemed a matter of common sense rather than controversy. This move has sent the bill back to Congress, where its opponents do not possess the 2/3 of votes required in both the House and Senate to override the veto. Unless its opponents can muster more votes, the rule allowing ESG factors in investment decisions will remain intact. 4. Macron government survives no confidence votes, The New York Times, CNN. On Monday, the French government led by President Emmanuel Macron successfully fended off 2 no-confidence votes in the French National Assembly, paving the way for the government's proposal to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. This controversial pension overhaul has triggered 2 months of nationwide protests and strikes, which are expected to continue as the government moves forward with implementing the changes that were pushed through last week without a vote in the National Assembly due to a lack of support. The plan was approved by the French Senate earlier this month. Although the government barely escaped one of the votes, with its opponents falling just 9 votes short of the 287 majority required for the bill to pass, the close result has raised doubts about the legitimacy of Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne's cabinet. 5. NYC braces for possible Trump indictment, protests, Reuters. New York City workers began preparing for potential protests on Monday, which were called for by former President Donald Trump ahead of a possible indictment related to hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels during his 2016 presidential campaign. To prepare for the protests, barricades were erected around a Manhattan courthouse where a grand jury heard further testimony in the case. Robert Costello, a lawyer who was possibly the grand jury's final witness, stated that former Trump fixer Michael Cohen handled the payment to Daniels without involving Trump. The former president, who is currently seeking the GOP's 2024 presidential nomination, has publicly predicted that he will be indicted on Tuesday, which would be the first indictment of a former president in U.S. history. Trump's call for protests has raised concerns about the potential for another riot like the one that occurred at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. 6. American held hostage for 6 years freed in West Africa, The Washington Post, NBC News. Jeffrey Woodkey, an American aid worker who was taken captive by suspected ISIS-linked militants in Niger 6 years ago, was released on Monday. The circumstances of his release are currently unknown, and it is believed that he may have been taken to neighboring Mali during his captivity. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan expressed his relief and gratitude via Twitter and thanked Niger's government for their assistance in securing Woodkey's release. The news came just after Secretary of State Antony Blinken completed the first-ever visit to Niger by a sitting Secretary of State. Additionally, French journalist Olivier Dubois, who was captured in Mali nearly 2 years ago, was also released. 7. LA strike shuts down nation's second-largest school district, Los Angeles Times, The New York Times. Efforts to prevent a strike by tens of thousands of Los Angeles school employees were unsuccessful, leading to a walkout set to start on Tuesday. The union representing 30,000 support workers had been seeking a 30% pay increase and an additional $2 per hour for the lowest-paid workers. Despite calling the strike unfortunate, union leaders maintained that it was necessary. The Los Angeles Teachers Union, which represents 35,000 members, supported the strike. Los Angeles School Superintendent Alberto Carvalho warned that the walkout would have a negative impact on the families of the district's 420,000 students and could exacerbate the losses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. 8. 6 more Oath Keepers convicted over January 6 attack, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times. On Monday, a federal jury convicted 6 individuals affiliated with the Oath Keepers militia group of crimes related to their participation in the January 6, 2021, assault on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of former President Donald Trump. 4 of the defendants, namely Sandra Parker, Laura Steele, Connie Meggs, and William Isaacs, were found guilty of various charges, including plotting to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power. The remaining 2 defendants, Benny Parker and Michael Green, were found guilty of less serious charges, but the jury has yet to decide on 1 felony charge each for them. This was the 3rd and final trial investigating the group's role in the attack, according to the New York Times. 9. Missouri Attorney General limits gender-affirming care for minors, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, The Associated Press. This Monday, Missouri's Republican Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, declared his intention to file an emergency rule that would restrict minors' access to gender-affirming care. Activists gathered at the state capitol, urging state senators to act on a bill that has been stalled and aims to ban the care altogether for children. Bailey's proposed emergency rule will mandate an 18-month waiting period, 15-hour-long therapy sessions, and treatment of any mental illnesses a child is experiencing before doctors can provide gender-affirming care to transgender minors in the state. Bailey stated that he was shielding children from being subject to inhumane science experiments. However, Mesa Akbar, the chief diversity officer for the American Psychological Association, criticized the rule as discrimination that would be harmful to transgender minors. 10. Trump loses effort to block evidence in civil rape trial, The Associated Press. On Monday, former President Donald Trump's final attempt to prevent the introduction of key evidence in his civil rape trial next month failed. U.S. District Judge Lewis A. Kaplan in Manhattan ruled that important witnesses could testify in the trial and that the jury could hear misogynistic comments made by Trump when he was recorded, apparently without his knowledge. Writer E. Jean Carroll filed the lawsuit in 2019, alleging in a memoir that Trump raped her in the mid-1990s in a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman, an upscale Manhattan department store. Trump claimed he had never met Carroll at the store and did not know her. In a deposition, he dismissed Carroll's claims, stating that she was not his type.